wherever you are. Hope you're all safe.
This meeting is being recorded.
Sa tingin ko, tayo ay nagsusurvive kasi we pray a lot. And speaking of prayer, I think it's really good to start this event with some prayers. So now let's put ourselves in the presence of God. Let's have a moment of silence. Almighty Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for yesterday. We thank you for the divine healing, divine providence, and blessing to keep us going, to keep, to make our work convenient for us and for the public to understand how we do things. Kami po ay nagpapasalamat din sa mga biyayang binigay niyo sa amin, yung trabahong binigay niyo sa amin, more importantly, Lord. Papasalamat kami sa aming participants ngayon, sa organizers nito, sa aming partners, ang Philippine Press Institute, tsaka ang Seidel Foundation. Without them, hindi po mabubuo ang programang ito. Kami po ay mananalangin lagi for our health, especially sa mga may sakit ngayon. Sana po ay pagaling niyo po sila. This we ask through Christ our Lord. Amen. Yun. Magandang umaga ulit.
Amen.
Okay, a very interesting discussion we're going to have this morning, conversations on the ethics and elections for next year. This is going to be a first discussion on the revised Code of Ethics by the PPI and with the help and support of the Asian Institute of Journalism and Communication. At saka yung pag-uusapan din natin ang maraming bagay about elections. At nagpapasalamat kami not only sa members ng JSAP, Journalism Studies Association of the Philippines, pero sa board din nandito ngayon kasama natin kasi sila po ang bumubuo ng JSAP at sila po ang nagtrabaho para mabuo po ang JSAP. For the interest of the public, mamaya po explain ni Professor Ipe what JSAP is all about. Ano ang mga programang pwedeng gawin ng JSAP para sa industriya ng edukasyon at sa komunikasyon at para sa publiko na rin. And very important yung i-highlight natin yung public engagement kasi itong public forum na to, I say public forum because it's not just limited. Ang participants are not just limited to the members of JSAP, pero meron po tayong mga members of the public. So dyan meron po di tayo. So importante po na malaman ng publiko na habang nag-uusap-usap tayo sa isang mahalagang paksa na kailangan pag-usapan ay kasama sila sa conversation na ito. Mamaya i-introduce natin yung ating mga panelists. Sila po ay journalists and educators at the same time. I hope na marami tayong matututunan sa conversation na ito. I'm pretty sure that with the countless webinars and countless seminars online, we've been hearing a lot from these panelists already. Pero ngayon po, iba yung pag-uusapan natin. Ayun, to officially open our program, papakilala muna po ako. My name is Ariel Sisabelina. I'm the Executive Director of the Philippine Press Institute. It's also known as the National Association of Newspapers. If you want to know more about the PPA, it's just a click away. It's www.fieldpressinstitute.net, and we have also another website on pandemic reporting, which is www.ppanewscommons.net, supported by Seidel Foundation and Nickel Asia Corporation. Ayun. I'd like to call, she cannot make it this morning, but to read her message, I'm talking about the president or chairperson of the JSAP, Professor Lucia Tangi. To read her message is the corporate secretary, the board secretary of JSAP, Professor Cherry Pebre.
Thank you so much, Sir
Hi, ma'am. Good morning.
Hi.
Kumusta na?
Good morning. Eto, maganda pa rin at kasing gwapo mo.
Of course. Ang tagal na natin hindi nakita, no? Pero ang online webinar na ganito. Yun.
Yes, and good thing we have the technology.
Of
Diba?
course.
So,
I give the floor to you.
Thank you so much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Maayong adlaw sa inyong tanan. It is my honor and privilege to read the message of my good friend, also the chairman of JSAP, Professor Lucia Tangi of University of the Philippines, and here it goes. In May 2022, our nation will be facing another milestone. We will be choosing the president who will lead us to the post-pandemic era. It is important that we vote for leaders who will lead us towards economic and moral recovery while ensuring an environment of democracy. The Philippine media has a pivotal role to play in ensuring the success or failure of the upcoming elections. How must media cover the upcoming elections? How can the Philippine media remain ethical in the midst of corruption, disinformation, and propaganda? Association of the Philippines, or JSAP, which was formed in 2019 with the support by the Internews Philippines and USAID, has initiated this webinar titled Of Journalism, Ethics, and Elections Towards a Democracy Resilient Society, in the hope of providing a perspective to educators, future journalists, and media practitioners on how to improve the coverage of elections. Thanks to the support and generosity of the Philippine Press Institute and the Seidel Foundation, HSF, for this webinar. I regret that I cannot join you this morning because of some urgent matters, but I am sure that you will be intellectually stimulated and challenged with the discussion of our speakers. Welcome to the JSAP webinar. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Lucia P. Tangi, President and Chair, Journalism Studies Association of the Philippines, JSAP. Thank you, Sir Ariel.
Thanks, Professor.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for joining us today and setting the tone of this webinar this morning. Just to remind our participants, we are on a webinar mode, meaning nakamute po kayo except the panelists and the training team. At you can use the hashtag ethics and elections. Yung pala yun, yung hashtag natin. Shout out to those watching us live via Facebook and also, of course, yung nasa meeting room. And thank you so much for joining us today. Okay, let's pinasalamatan natin sa Seidel Foundation at kailangan natin marinig a few words from our partner on behalf of Attorney Guts Heineke, the resident representative of Seidel Foundation to the Philippines. I'd like to call the project director, one of the project directors of or officers of Seidel Foundation, Caroline Lee, for Seidel Foundation's message. Hi, Carol.
Hello, good morning, Ariel. Thank you. Good morning to everyone. Thanking all our speakers and esteemed panelists to be here today. I'm Caroline Lee, Program Coordinator of the Seidel Foundation, which is a German foundation based in Munich, Germany. And we have been working in the Philippines in cooperation with local partners for more than 40 years now, building up democracy and good governance. And that alone gives you an idea why we are working closely with the Philippine Press Institute, amongst other organizations. And this morning, we're glad to be supporting this activity, discussing journalism, ethics, and elections. As you know, Germany is also will also be holding elections later this year, September. So this is a very timely topic, we find this a fitting, a supporting activity to the series of voter education activities we've been holding together with the PPI as well, in collaboration with a string of state universities and colleges so far. And this will still be continuing the rest of the year and possibly until next year. So we're glad to be working with the Journalism Studies Association of the Philippines. And we're looking forward to a very fruitful exchange this morning. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Carol. Carol, meron akong isang tanong lang bago tayo umpisahan yung discussion natin. And before I turn over the floor to Professor Ipe, what do you think is the crucial role of journalists during elections, especially talking about the pandemic?
Sorry? Can you please repeat?
What do you think is the crucial role of journalists or media practitioners in general during elections? Especially, nag-uusapan natin yung kakaibang election natin next year, ang setting is the pandemic.
Right, yeah. Because when you talk about having a pandemic, people have this idea to keep distance, especially we're asked to have this physical distancing. So the journalists, I feel, have this special role of bringing the news, the reality, the real people, the real situation closer to the public. So provide them with this, possibly a channel to get to know the candidates better, know the actual situation better. If, for example, there's going to be a hybrid or an actual election in person situation, people might have doubts. And that's one of the things that they will learn from the journalists themselves. How is the situation set up? Is it really safe? And for them to just come out and practice their right to vote, and for them also to get the actual situation of what's going on in the area, in their localities, and in the other places as well, because PPI especially has a very healthy network of community newspapers and reporters who can bring the real situation on the ground to the knowledge of the public. So that is very important, because otherwise, if your only access is the national media, then you could be missing out on a lot of what the real situation is on the ground.
Yeah.
So that is how I see it. One of the very important things that the journalists can help do.
Good point there on community journalism. Thanks, Carol, for joining us today. And we stand by for a
Ariel.
lot of discussions on this particular topic. And thanks, Seidel Foundation, for the support. At this point, to introduce the activity is the Vice President of JSAP. He's also a journalism lecturer at the University of Santo Tomas. Please welcome Professor Felipe Salvosa II.
Good morning, Ariel, and good morning to all of our panelists and attendees. Allow me to give you a brief overview of today's event. As part of its objective to keep journalism educators and practitioners abreast of key developments and issues in the practice of journalism, the Journalism Studies Association of the Philippines, or JSAP, is holding this virtual roundtable discussion titled "Of Journalism Ethics and Elections Towards a Democracy Resilient Society" via the Zoom video conferencing platform and streaming live on the Facebook pages of the JSAP and the Philippine Press Institute. The theme of the forum highlights its urgency. With just 3 months left before contenders for elected office filed their certificates of candidacy with the Commission on Elections, ushering in an election cycle that culminates on May 9, 2022 Election Day. It will be a freewheeling but moderated discussion with invited journalists, researchers, and academics focusing on how best to approach news coverage of the election campaign amid the COVID-19 pandemic, what ethical journalism principles to keep in mind, and how journalism could help shape an informed electorate, in the process building a democracy-resilient society. The forum will provide important contextual information that will help guide classroom discussions on the election campaign as a major news event. The forum will also be a venue to discuss two recent and related endeavors: the study, Democracy Resilience and Media Literacy Amid the Pandemic, Perspectives of Civic Journalists by Dr. Hemedy Mora of PUP and Mr. Ariel Sabelino, which highlights the need to promote democracy resilience and media literacy ahead of the elections, and the second edition, 2021, of the Code of Professional and Ethical Conduct in Covering Elections developed by the Philippine Press Institute. The virtual forum is JSAP's second offering after last year's 2-day New Normal in Journalism Education webinar. For this event, the first in a series of webinars for 2021, JSAP has partnered with the PPI, the National Association of Newspapers and the country's oldest professional media organization. The roundtable discussion is also made possible with the support of the Seidel Foundation. The speakers for the roundtable discussion include two media practitioners, Mr. Christian V. Esguerra, host of ANC's After the Fact nightly news program and the Facts First podcast, and a veteran of election coverages, and a journalist based in Davao City, Ms. Amalia Cabusao, Editor-in-Chief of the Mindanao Times. Joining the discussion are Dr. Hema Dimora, Dean of the College of Communication of the Polytechnic University of the Philippines and co-author of the Democracy Resilience Study, and Therese Santiago Torres, Director of the Asian Institute of Journalism and Communication, who will talk about the new Code of Ethics for election coverage. Mr. Ariel Severino, the PPI Executive Director, will moderate the discussion. Our audience is composed mostly of journalism educators in the college, high school, and elementary levels, school paper advisors, and media practitioners, the core membership of JSAP, although journalism students have also been invited to attend the forum. I will end here, and again, on behalf of the board of the JSAP, I would like to thank our webinar team. I would also like to thank the PPI and the Seidel Foundation for helping us organize this webinar. Ariel?
Maraming salamat, Professor Ipe, sa pagpapakilala din sa ating mga panelists ngayon. I'm pretty sure handang-handa na sila at saka madaming tanong mamaya. At uumpisahan na natin ngayon. Hindi ko na siya introduce uli, pero na-introduce na ni Professor Ipe yung mga panelists natin. Ito, sa mga fans ni Christian Esguerra, umpisan ko na kay Christian. Diba? Professor Ipe, Christian, okay ka na? Good morning. Thanks for joining us today, Christian. One question muna tayo. Ano daw yung pinaka-memorable na elections coverage? Una muna, bago muna yan. Which elections did you cover? Oo. Nakamute yata si... nakamute ba? Christian, nakamute. It happens to the best. Unmute ka na? Hindi ko pa rin marinig.
Unplug lang po uli yung yung
Hintay natin. Ayan, sige. Okay na. Ayun. Ayan, okay na. Narinig mo ako kanina, yung first question ko. Anong elections kinover mo? Which elections?
I started covering elections in 2007, yung midterm elections, and then presidential election in 2010, and then midterms again in 2013, tapos yung 2016.
Ano pinaka-memorable?
So the first three elections I covered, I was still with the Inquirer.
Okay, were you Inquirer? Crossing over from print to broadcast to online na ngayon, So ano yung pinaka-memorable mo if there is, Oo.
Wala man ako talaga yung super memorable na I would latch on to, but perhaps the coverage of the 2010 elections, because that was, I thought, a turning point in our system, diba? In our democratic life. Tapos medyo maliwanag din yung issues at that time, diba? Anti-corruption president, that was the campaign, and then he won. But that time, I was focusing also on the campaign of then president, a former president, Joseph Estrada, because that time he was trying to fix his public image. He wanted redemption, diba sabi niya? So he decided to run again.
Sabi nga nila, Christian, lagi, narinig natin lagi, it's always an interesting time to cover elections in the Philippines. But how is it like to cover elections in the Philippines? Magulo ba? Madali lang ba? For a seasoned journalist like you? Oo.
Madaling mahirap na nakakainis minsan. And then very frustrating also. Because you have to understand that when you cover elections in the Philippines, you also have to deal with the main realities of Philippine politics and the electoral system, which are both fractured and very problematic. So you will have a front row seat of those problems when you start covering elections. And sa akin, unang-una, I'd like to thank you guys for organizing this forum, because I think this is very useful, not just for journalists, but also for the public at large, for the voters who will be making those choices on the ballot next year. So gusto ko muna siguro ipaliwanag sa inyo, and I'd like to share this. Binabanggit ko rito sa klase during our discussions. Remember that elections and politics, basically they're all about perception. So during a campaign, politicians, their media operators, their political operators would try their best, invest big money to control the narrative, to control how they are seen in public, and they're going to make big use of reporters, of journalists, of media organizations. So that in itself has to be clear to us as journalists. Gagamitin at gagamitin tayo. So dun pa lang dapat maliwanag na sa atin ano ba yung role natin in terms of bridging the voters and the politicians and the candidates. Kasi for instance, bakit nag-invest ng heavy money yung politician sa kanyang kampanya? Because he wants to get elected. So gagamitin niya yung media to be able to achieve that particular goal. That's why doon pumapasok yung video corruption, conflicts of interest, and I'm sure all of us know that these things are
unethical
happening.
practices, unethical practices. Kasi you mentioned about your frustration or frustrating, ano yung frustrations mo sa kapwa journalists on how we or they conducted their functions or duties as journalists? Anong frustrations yun? Na hindi na ba na-cover ng
Sometimes, for
maayos?
sometimes kasi pag hindi masyadong discerning yung reporter or yung news organization, okay, siguro maraming strings attached. The way we cover certain politicians or candidates are skewed. Let's say in favor of one politician. Mas nagagamit yung isang organization, yung isang newscast, yung isang dyaryo to promote unnecessarily a politician. So dun pa lang may frustration na.
Yeah.
Number two, we also have to accept the fact that many journalists among our ranks are also very much susceptible, and they're giving in to the temptations of corruption and conflicts of interest of outreach. So lahat yun nakikita natin sa election.
Yeah. And speaking of conflict of interest, mamaya pag-uusapan natin, Christian, but let me just go to Prof. Dr. Hemady Mora, who had or has an interesting study on democracy resilience and MIL, etc., on voter education. Professor Hemady, kumusta na po kayo? Good morning sa inyo. As I said, magandang umaga. As I said, ito yung pinakaunang public, not your public appearance, but I think the releasing publicly the study on democracy resilience, vis-a-vis how community journalists or journalists in general look at the elections, look at their role as purveyors of truth and chronicles of truth for these elections. Please tell us a little bit more about that study, kasi I've been reading a few studies on democracy resilience, pero ito ka talaga, ang context niya, Philippines, Please tell us a little bit more about it, Dr. Mora.
Okay, so first and foremost, Ariel, the title of the study is Democracy Resilience and Media Literacy Amid the Pandemic. So, pasok ito sa pandemic experience natin, And basically, we got the perspectives of the civic journalists of the country. So, currently, democracy resilience kasi has been a challenge. At alam naman nating lahat yan during the pandemic. Now, I'll go straight ahead to your question about voting. Democracy resilience kasi is, of course, the ability to bounce back to the normal state of a democratic nation. So we are all hoping na talagang democracy resilient ang ating bansa. But in between democracy resilience and media literacy is another variable which we call civic engagement. Diyan sa civic engagement na yan, diyan papasok ang voting or ang pagboto ng isang mamamayan sa isang demokratikong bansa. So now, when we talk about civic engagement, this is a responsibility of a citizen to his or her nation, di ba? Now, it has been proven na ang media literacy kasi is very crucial para sa civic engagement. Hindi pwedeng you are engaged and then you are not media literate. Diba? And it's also been proven na ang media literacy is crucial in fighting propaganda and disinformation. So kawing-kawing So every variable is related to each other. Now, everybody has a right to vote in a democratic country, and we all know that, But the question now is, would you be a responsible and intelligent voter? Yon ang tanong. Kasi hindi lang naman voters ang kailangan natin nowadays. What we need are intelligent and responsible voters. And in the study, very evident yung finding na hindi ka pwedeng maging intelligent and responsible voter kung hindi ka media literate. You know why? Because nowadays, proven and tested na, and it's also in the findings of our study, na the public is heavily relying on the social media. papaano kung hindi ka naman marunong gumamit ng social media?
Mm.
Diba? So, ano siya how can you now be an intelligent voter if you do
Dr.
not
Mora,
know?
yeah,
Yes.
Dr. Mora, let's talk about a result, one of the results of the study. Resilience, matatag na demokrasya. Anong
Yes.
sabi ng mga respondents when they rate the democracy resilience in the country? That's very interesting to know. Kasi itong ang pinag-ugatan ng democracy resilience, itong paano tayo, how we conduct ourselves, and
Yes.
specifically journalists in the time of the pandemic. Anong sabi nila? How
Yes,
did they
that's
rate
very,
it? Oo.
Very interesting question. Now, Ariel, because our respondents and participants, our key informants are the civic journalists of the country, nag-disclose sila ng mga totoong karanasan nila, and they admitted that they have been experiencing limitations, inhibitions, and restrictions. Katulad na lang ng sa coverage, they are being limited. Well, this is true and this is expected in a pandemic setting. But halimbawa na lang sa coverage, hindi pwedeng marami, isa, dalawa lang, based on IATF guidelines, they have to follow. And then even yung sa space, so they have to observe physical distancing din. And then ito pa, yung access to information. Medyo problematic tayo sa aspeto na yan because no matter how hard our journalists are trying to retrieve and access the information that they need in order to inform the public, they could only settle for what is being given to them. Kasi nga may mga excuses like nasa pandemic tayo, ganyan. And then another is yung restriction also in mobility na so hindi katulad before na all access sa mga journalists. Ngayon, all access pa rin naman pero limited number lang ng mga journalists ang pwedeng pumasok dito, ang pwedeng pumunta dyan, hindi pwedeng lahat. So they could not deploy all their reporters to cover.
Saka there's a shrinking newsroom kasi. Sabi ng ating mga kasama na when we did a separate activity to discuss about media conditions, lumiliit yung, kasi nag-release na ng mga tao, hindi na kayang bayaran. But Dr. Man, later, let's talk about, binabanggit mo kanina na paano nga ba yung democracy resilience para matugunan yung pag-educate ng mga tao. Kasi binabanggit mo kanina, it's just a matter of voting, but pre-voting, yung pre-elections, dapat meron ng voter education, dapat nagbago na yung pagtingin nila sa pag-ibobote nila, tamang pagboboto a little later. Let's go to Ami. Hi, Ami, from Davao City. My good friend Ami here, Vice President of the PPI. Ami, since pinag-uusapan na natin elections ngayon, ikaw, you're a seasoned editor, a reporter, a journalist. Ano yung mga pitfalls in covering elections, specifically in Mindanao? Kasi meron tayong nire-recognize natin yung different geographical landscapes in the Philippines, at saka yung paano ang eleksyon sa bawat area, especially we're talking about elections in the hotspots, conflicted areas, etc. Ayan. Naka-unmute na ba si Ami? Ayun.
Sorry. I think when we think of elections in Mindanao, I think we always think of the Maguindanao massacre. Remember that? In 2009, there was a very it was during the filing of the certificate of candidacy, and if you remember, 35 journalists were killed. There were lawyers also, and even citizens who just passed along that highway, who were also massacred. Part of the Maguindanao, now we call the Maguindanao massacre in 2009. So it's very difficult if you're in the past, not considering the pandemic now. It was very difficult because, of course, you know that in Mindanao, like anywhere else in the country, I think, political patronage, and then there's clans, and you have to deal with all of these things. And in the case of also in Davao City, as you know, the same people are there. No, if not the father, the daughter, the son. It has always been like that. How difficult it is for the media. Now with the pandemic, as Professor Mora said, we are very restricted and our movements are limited. And in these areas where I said that there's a conflict, they're considered election hotspots. it also happens that the internet connection in these areas are not stable. So we're looking at a situation where journalists cannot go out, cannot do their usual press conferences or interviews, and they cannot do that online because of the unstable internet conditions. So that would be that would make it very difficult for journalists to do their job. So I don't know. We're still thinking of how the elections in Mindanao would look like. But of course, there's another big concern, which I will say maybe later on,
Later,
Ariel.
yeah.
On what's happening in
I
Mindanao.
mean,
It's really very urgent.
Yeah, you're a journalist, you're an editor of Mindanao for so long a time. Yung context na kailangan natin sa isang elections coverage, that's just mere numbers because there's more to it than reporting statistics, numbers.
Yeah.
He said, she said.
Mm,
Would
mm,
you
mm.
rather send an experienced reporter or a neophyte?
I think we really need to get the context of the area where you are. No? For instance, in Mindanao, in Davao City, you need to know a little bit of history and who these people are, who are in elective positions. And I think that helps. In other places like Sulu, Basilan, Tawi-Tawi, and these areas, elections really happen because of they're still ruled by tribes and clans, and so that has been the same for since maybe the start of the
So mas
elections.
kailangan yung a more experienced reporter to cover elections?
Yes, I think so, but it also depends on the news organization. They, especially for if they have no reporters, which is actually non-existent now. There are no new. In our case, they need to be. There should be a little bit of sharing of skills, how to go about all these very difficult things, and to also really know the place where you will be assigned to cover.
Kasi yung iba kasi, nagiging training ground yung covering elections for new or neophytes.
That's right.
So okay lang naman for as long as they have the skills. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Later on,
skills and a context. They should know the place, the dynamics of
Tsaka yung
the
history,
people
di ba, ng isang lugar, especially Mindanao, na ang daming pwede i-consider, as you said. So let's talk about Bangsamoro later on.
Okay.
But ngayon, hi Therese, good morning. Hello.
Hi, good morning.
Ayun. Interesting itong Code of Ethics na to, yung in-expand natin from 1998. It's on the PPA website if you guys want to read the original Code of Ethics in covering elections. 1998 po yun, drafted or crafted by the Philippine Press Council under the Philippine Press Institute. Pero pag-usapan natin in-expand na code. Therese, why do we have to expand it? Why do we have to revise it? Hindi na ba siya relevant sa tingin nyo? Bakit? What's the principle behind the expanded Code of Ethics in covering elections?
Yeah, in the first edition kasi, no, that was from way back from 1998. There were only two main sections. First, covering elections, which includes guidelines on paying your way during election coverage and managing conflicts of interest. And then the second main section was about writing the story. Although it was quite comprehensive, we now face new challenges in covering elections. The first edition, I'll just share a bit more. On the first edition, it also included moonlighting for political parties, potential conflicts of interest and abuse of media privileges. But as the media plays a crucial role now in ensuring that voters are able to make informed decisions next year in 2022, journalists need to be prepared to cover the election amid the pandemic and in the face of evolving challenges in the digital media landscape, where we see a lot of misinformation and disinformation. And although we know na matagal na naman na may misinformation and disinformation, and as Mr. Esguerra pointed out earlier, politicians have been controlling the narrative, and although the way they control the narrative now in the digital age has evolved. So in the 2019 elections, we found that political actors had intensified and expanded their disinformation efforts, from mobilizing troll armies to spreading of false narratives through YouTube and Facebook closed groups and chat groups. So beyond fair coverage and equal access to media space or airtime among all political parties and candidates, journalists need to learn to be more mindful about how disinformation networks operate in the country. They need to master steps in verification that need to be added to the process to ensure that the press does not contribute to the spread of false and misleading information. So kasama na dun yung detecting deepfakes, artificial intelligence generated fake videos. So I will stop there. I can
Yeah, sure.
elaborate more.
And Mamia, let's elaborate on some of the provisions in the new expanded code of ethics. But you talked about conflict of interest. I told Christian will be talking about it. Christian, curious ako, anong minimum requirement to cover election? Meaning, if you're a journalist, seasoned or not, paano yun? Apart from the skills, what you need to cover the elections? Kasi I think sa tingin ko lang it's not for everybody. I mean, it could not just be a training ground for new journalists, yung mga newbies, pero I think yung sabi nga ni Ame ka context, perspective, etc. kailangan. So, ano yung kailangan talaga? Especially ngayon, pinag-uusapan natin, the battleground will be social media, controlling the narrative. Alam na natin kung sino-sino yung mga yon. Sige, paano yun?
Sa akin kasi may advantages at disadvantages yung assigning a young reporter and a veteran to an election coverage. For example, preferably you would assign a veteran to be able to provide more context. Meron siya institutional memory
Right.
So hindi niya kailangan basta-basta i-google yan Pag nagpunta yung isang kandidato sa ganitong lugar, alam niya na agad yung konteksto. Bakit siya nandun? So ito pag-aaralan pa na mas bata. Kasi ang problema minsan, pag yung veterano, meron na rin siyang mga habits na nakasanayan talaga. Basically, bad habits in journalism that he was able to acquire. And that
Jaded na kasi, no? Jaded na.
Yes. Pag newbie naman, of course, it's no assurance that that particular young reporter won't engage in corrupt practices. But there's still that idealism on the part of that reporter. So mas pag-aaralan. So ano yan choose your, you have two options there.
Yeah.
Dito lang siguro mas maganda maintindihan ng mga nanonood sa atin. Bakit ba nangyayaring corruption dito sa election? Because lahat siya may iba't ibang levels of corruption. For example, yung reporter, di ba, tinatanong mo ano yung kailangan ng isang reporter na magko-cover ng isang election.
Right.
Dapat alam niya yung kino-cover niya, di ba? Dapat naintindihan niya. Dapat may talino sa utak niya para makapag-cover siya na maayos. Pero number two, there has to be proper formation, strength of character. And you cannot suddenly become ethical once you start covering elections. It's not instantaneous.
Yeah.
It has to begin somewhere and much earlier. Hindi mo pwedeng sabihin na, sige, I was engaging in some corrupt practices while covering other stories. Pero pag election, magiging matino ako. You cannot say that.
Yeah.
Okay? It has to
Yeah.
start early. Tapos for example, yung reporter, let's say, may engage sa mga corrupt practices. Kasi napakadaming opportunities for corruption sa coverage, di ba? Ang nakikita kong problema rito, the way newsrooms assign reporters to cover elections. Ina-assign sila into beats. Naka-assign sa isang particular political party or candidate. Kunwari, 6 yung tumatakbo sa presidential election, 6 na set of reporters ang magko-cover nun. At nandun yung tendency na ma-in love, of course, figuratively, yung reporter doon sa kino-cover niya. Nagkakaroon ng Stockholm Syndrome. At the end of the coverage, at the end of the campaign season, they already become fans, rara boys and girls of these candidates. I saw that in 2010. Yung mga, may iba ako nakita mga nagko-cover ng ERAP, nagko-cover ng Pinoy, nag-cover ng Bilyar. They were starting to wear the colors.
Wow.
Yung shirts na pinamimigay. They're using all those fan signs, lahat-lahat, di ba? So, di ba, sa corruption, meron tayong tinatawag na perceived tsaka apparent
Correct.
Hindi kailangan mag-engage ka sa corrupt practices for people to think that you're corrupt. Pag naisip nila, because of certain impressions, because of images and posts, andun na agad yun So that's one. Ibang usapan pa yung inaalagaan ng mga kandidato, yung mga nagko-cover sa kanila. So sinasagot yung plane fare, yung pagkain, hotel accommodation. But of course, to be fair, maraming mga news organizations, especially the big ones, they pay their way.
Yeah.
the news coverage. Pero yung mga maliliit, sadly, that's a reality. How can you cover candidates going around the Philippines? Mamimili ka talaga, di ba?
Yeah.
Pero syempre, it's not an assurance that even those working for big news organizations are not engaging corrupt practices. Magugulat kayo, yung mga ibang napapanood natin ng mga sikat dito, yung mga nababasa natin ng mga veteran journalists, I saw some of them, how they actually engage in corrupt practices. Pati yung mga pabaon after covering a provincial sortie.
Yeah.
Kasi nakakasuka. If I may add that, Ariel, di ba? For example, pwedeng matino yung reporter. Ang problema, ang kinakausap ng media operators or campaign operators, yung editor sa loob.
Exactly.
Kumbaga ang usapan niya sa journalism, isulat mo na yan, ito na yung tutukan mo angulo. Bayad na yan sa taas eh. Alam
May
natin
blessing.
sa industriya kung sino yung mga nasa taas.
Exactly.
Diba? So magugulat ka, bakit merong unfair, para may inexplicable treatment yung isang particular story. To cite a very concrete example, kunwari 2010, I saw this, or 2016. There was this one candidate whose quotes kept appearing in the front page stories of one newspaper. Lagi siya may comment doon. Pag binasa mo yung story, hindi man lang inayos yung pagkakasalansan. Di ba, pag ikaw yung editor, magko-combine ka different stories from different campaigns, di ba?
Exactly.
Sa kanya, lagi nasa taas.
Ah.
Hindi yan napapansin ng mga nagbabasa, di ba? Sinasabi na,
Hindi.
siguro kasi may value yung yung tao na to eh. Pero, among us, alam mo na, either malapit lang siya ron sa editor or talagang bayad siya. Yung
Saka yung
publiko,
yung publiko, Christian, would not really recognize a PR, di ba? Alam nila, it's news and all. Saka yung sabi ko kanina, pagkasalansan. Christian, later, let's talk about vulnerabilities kasi we know that journalists are very disposed to temptations during elections. But I'd like to go to, thanks Christian, later on, pag-usapan din natin. I'd like to go to Dr. Hemedy from where we left off about access to information. Dr. Hemedy, ito yung pinag-usapan natin, yung binanggit mo kanina, disinformation, infodemic, AI, etc. Binanggit din to ni Therese. Paano makakatulong yung isang matatag na demokrasya para itong ganito maibsan yung problema natin sa infodemic, sa information disorder insofar as voter education is concerned. Kasi binabanggit mo kanina na after all these efforts, hindi naman lang ngayon tayo nag-voter education, di ba? Ang dami natin voter education efforts, sobrang tagal na. Yung iba tumanda na, may voter education pa rin. So, paano ngayon itong may study tayo, very interesting study, at saka mismong journalist na nagsabi na ito yung demokrasya natin ngayon. So, paano natin maiibsan yung information disorder para maging okay yung access to information, not just by journalists but the public, kailangan ng access to information din.
Okay, thank you, Ariel. Napakaganda ng question mo. But I would like to give my answer on based on two perspectives muna. Punta muna tayo sa mga journalists. Kasi ang pinag-uusapan natin dito, when we talk about democracy resilience, we promote also the rights of the media. Ito yung gustong-gusto kong sabihin, if there will be no consultations done among our media men as to the guidelines, to the guidelines of the coverage of the elections, we can expect problems and concerns. Kasi personally, I believe that the media should be allowed to ask questions and also give suggestions during the formulation of the guidelines. So kung merong mga guidelines si COMELEC, may guidelines sa botohan para sa mga journalists, dapat isali ang mga journalists sa framing ng mga guidelines na yan. Kasi after all, they are the ones concerned. They have been doing this for so many years. Pero this time it would be different. Different because sabi nga ni Ma'am Amalia kanina, Ma'am Kabusaw, unang-una sa lahat, the journalists are using the internet. Okay, so how do we go about this? How do we go about that? Pwede ba maging malinaw ang guidelines? Karapatan po ng bawat journalist na, bigyan naman sila ng guidelines na workable sa kanila. I think that is also part of democracy resilience. Kung tayo ay nasa democratic nation, hindi lang yung kapakanan ng mga voters ang iisipin din natin. Iisipin din natin ang kapakanan ng ating mga media men. So, katulad ngayon, may alam na ba tayo as to the guidelines? Wala pa, di ba?
And so far,
Wala pa
so far.
sa atin. Sana, kung yan man ay hindi pa nabubuo, bago man yan buuin or sa proseso ng pagbubuo, mayroon naman sanang consultation na maganap. Tanungin din nila ang side ng mga journalists. Kung ito ba ay doable, kung ito ba ay workable, kung ito ba ay convenient, kung ito ba ay, when it comes to health, di ba? Health and safety, ipapasok ko na rin dyan ang health and safety of journalists. Kapakanan ng mga journalists. And then yung isa naman, yung sinasabi mo na about our voters, about the voting public. Napakahalaga ng critical public. Kasi yung pagiging critical-minded ng public is actually an indication of media literacy. Dahil if our voters are easily swayed by propaganda in the social media, easily swayed by what they read, and they do not even fact check, they do not even analyze what they are reading or what they are receiving in the social media, napaka madaling, blinded agad, and then oo agad or bow agad, and then alam naman natin, even ang mga citizens, ang netizens natin, sila mismo, nagpapasa sila ng disinformation without them knowing.
Correct.
Na
Dr.
yun
Mora, let's talk about, you mentioned about fact-checking. How important is it, not only for journalists, but for the public to appreciate fact-checking? Kasi ang daming proliferation of misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, a lot of information disorder, social media. Paano ito, babalikan ko yung kaninang tanong ko, insofar access to information, paano na lang yung mga journalists ngayon under existing restrictions na meron tayong tinatawag na limitasyon sa pagbabalita. Pero ang publiko is also always hungry for information, di ba? Pero it's the same public din, nagko-consume din ng disinformation.
Yes. Kaya nga, di ba, issue ngayon yung mga troll farms. Dahil, sa totoo lang, the public believes in disinformation. Even yung sa mga trolling na yan, the public is also swayed. They don't, most of them, I'm not saying all of them, no? Pero yung kulang sa media literacy training. Kasi, Ariel, media literacy has now become a part of our advocacy. Advocacy yan ng mga educators, advocacy din yan ng media. Naturuan ang public natin na maging discerning, 'di ba? To discern what is accurate and what is false. So, ang mga tao ay kailangang turuan. Sino ang magtuturo sa kanila? Kami po as educators, ginawa naming advocacy yan. That is why puro kami webinars on disinformation. Diba? Ganon din ang PPI and the JSAP also and other media organizations. Tulong-tulong tayo because the public is in need of education also. Lalo na hindi naman lahat ay marunong gumamit ng social media. Totoo po yan.
Yeah.
Ayan. So right now, that is a challenge. We are facing this challenge, all of us. So how do we now educate our voting public?
Correct. Mamaya pag-uusapan natin yung social media pag nagtanong na ako kay Teresa na ba. Here's a question directed at Ami Kabusaw. Hi Ami, the question is, or comment and question at the same time, not to sullen the memory of those who died in Maguindanao. One sad reason why there were media people in the ill-fated convoy is because they were promised to get something for joining the convoy. The reporters were used as human shields. Sad reality. Ang hirap i-enforce ng ethics if our media workers are not paid right. It's not a question, but it is a comment from Aris Gutierrez. I mean, can you comment on it?
I don't want to talk about why they were there because it's a long story. Anyway, there was an event in Coronadal. So people were there. It was a fiesta, I think. So some of our friends, some of them, Ariel, they were there. And since, the Ampatuan and the Mangudadato, they were really, at the time, it was a very hot issue. And so Mangudadato was there and he invited the media to join his wife, hindi siya, to file the certificate of candidacy. Well, whether they were offered or I cannot say because I don't have first-hand knowledge. But, as media media organizations in the provinces, we usually find comfort in the numbers, di ba? Marami tayo, nobody, nothing. And then if people go there, they also want to go there. So you can just imagine there were so many media, not only reporters, but also the drivers, the sales executives, because it was really a big event in Coronadal that they were covering. So so that happened, and I can't say, but of course about the question on that they're not paid well. All of us, I mean, in the community media, we're not really paid as much, I think, as the national media, because media organizations it's also a business enterprise. I mean, especially now and where do we get our revenue? It's from advertisements and nothing else. So a lot of newspapers are folding here in Mindanao. I'm not sure about the other parts of the country, and there are only very few now surviving with like limited number of pages. With some of the correspondents now taking the still no longer writing. So it's really basically the newsroom is shrinking. So yeah, it's really very difficult. But you have to see that in community, on the other side, no, you also have to look at these people, these reporters, as very altruistic. No? They know that they don't get anything out of that, and this is a very personal issue. The Mindanao Institute of Journalism, which I am a part of, we have been conducting trainings, and we have been conducting conferences on how the media is now working in Mindanao. And there are still some who are working even without pay. And I think that's very altruistic. So if you say that they're there for the money, or maybe it's very easy to be self-righteous.
Pero
if you're there in the place where you are,
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it's so easy to say that it can be altruistic in the pandemic, and altruism is a very good thing to come by. Pero you talked about yung hindi maayos na sweldo. Is that enough reason to be unethical? Is it a reason why a lot of journalists...
That's why they're no longer there. That's why they're no longer there. There are only very, very few journalists now working. And usually they own, or they publish their own newspapers. So, well, I'm just saying altruism because they're still there. But of course, it's the
love, the passion for work.
It is, because they're also working as in the academy, for instance. They're also working in NGOs, whatever, in the mga groups like environmental groups,
advocacy
they're
groups.
They're now trying to do, because they're trying to do that to be able to earn money.
You mentioned about working for advocacy groups for as long as there are no conflicts of interest, right? You cannot be propagandist.
Of course, yes. Yeah.
Okay, that brings me to theories on the Code of Ethics, kasi violations on the Code of Ethics, a list of it goes on and on. Pero theories, I'd like to know, looking at certain provisions of the expanded Code of Ethics in reporting elections, what are, some instances that tarnish the reputation of the journalist and the integrity of the news organization that she works for? Kasi binanggit mo kanina, you have to pay your way, dapat hindi ka maging ninong. Like, for example, ninong or ninang ka na isang politiko na tumatakbo naman during elections, mga ganon, or binyag, o paano yun? Can you give us specific examples of unethical practices insofar as the provisions of the Code of Ethics in reporting elections are concerned?
In the Code of Ethics, we really emphasize that journalists should avoid any type of political involvement beyond voting. So, yun yung basic na principle. But going into detail, but kasama dun yung working for politicians, whether as a volunteer or whether you're paid or you're working as a volunteer, hindi siya dapat gawin. And also in connection with the new social media guidelines that we've added to the revised code, pati yung pagpo-post sa personal social media accounts about a journalist's political views, anything related to the elections na opinion, dapat iwasan. And actually, in an earlier draft of the revised code, we did not include that. But when we consulted journalists and editors, they emphasized that, right? So, kailangan talaga maging maingat because the public usually cannot distinguish between a journalist's personal posts, yung posts niya on his or her own Facebook account na opinion lang niya, and yung posts that are related to his or her official news coverage. So, and in addition to that, dapat hindi rin magre-report about individuals that they're related to or that they're friends with. So, for example, if they are friends with certain politicians, they should not report on those individuals. So those are just some examples.
There is a very interesting binanggit mo kanina because all of us are really active on Facebook and talking about netizens, etc. Journalists are netizens as well, right? How important it is to keep the integrity intact kasi sinasabi mo kanina dapat hiwala you're being a netizen, magrarant-rant ka, pero you're also protecting, or you also have the back of your mind protecting the interest of your, not to sully or not to destroy the reputation or credibility of your news organization. Especially during elections, di ba?
Yes, especially during elections because mahalaga talaga yung public trust. And once makita na nung public na ay parang may kinakampihan nito, even if it's a personal post, di ba, your own opinion, mahirap siyang i-regain. Mahirap i-regain yung public trust. So as the editors and the news heads emphasize in our dialogues with them, kailangan talaga, especially during the elections, maging maingat yung journalists sa pinopost nila. So of course, they can speak with their friends, with their families about their opinions, but iwasan na lang yung pagpo-post publicly.
Siguro ang hirap nung tiris, kating-kati ka na for somebody like me, di ba, na di ba, expressive on Facebook, tapos ang daming sinasabi, tapos now elections. Okay, mamaya pag-usapan pa natin a lot more of the provisions of the code. Pero our colleague from Baguio City, here's a question from Rima Liza Opinia for all our panelists. Okay, listen to this. Here in Cordillera, pag may darating na national candidate, madaming magko-cover, hindi lang dahil sa free food and money, but also may dala na ang mga reporter. Dala, close parenthesis, nakalagay doon, na nagmumultitasking, na marketing proposal para sa political ads. Okay? Ito, meron ding, may kinalaman din ito, ano ba to? Okay, ito yung mga national candidates, hindi naman nila gamay ang local issues, usually motherhood statements, so hindi talaga cover in general daw. Okay, balik tayo doon sa Christian kanina where we left off. We talked about vulnerabilities of journalists and being disposed sila sa a lot of temptations during elections. So in the light of this question from Rima Liza Opinio, a journalist from Baguio City, what's your view about this?
Well, I can only agree na nangyayari talaga lahat yan. And actually, nakakasuka eh. Kanina, pinapakinggan ko yung sinasabi ni Teresa regarding the revised code of ethics. Okay lahat yun eh. Ang tanong ko lang doon, i-implement ba siya ng mga newsrooms? Because you have to deal with the cultures within this newsrooms. Example, di ba sinabi ko kanina na you cannot instantly become ethical just because you're covering elections. Yung mga strings attached na ganyan, ako, very allergic sa akin yung term na kaibigan ko si congressman, kaibigan ko si senador. Kaya for example, pag bata pala yung reporter, dapat tinetemper niya na yung kilig pag nadidikit siya sa isang politikong dating lang na nababasa, ngayon ka-text na niya, di ba? So dapat iwasan yung pagiging starstruck kasi nanganganak yung padating ng araw eh. Ngayon, yung problema, yung mga newsrooms, they're not exactly actively policing their own ranks because maraming pwedeng ibaturo sa mga editors eh. Because when they were still going up the ranks, at one point in their careers, marami rin sila nagawa siguro, di ba? Example, yung simpleng pagkuha ng ninong at ninang sa kasal, sa binyag, ng mga politiko. May mga iba nagsasabi, well, that's my personal life. Ang problema, sa tingin nyo ba, yung mga nanonood sa atin, di ba? Ako ba si congressman? Of course, there are exceptions. Siguro talagang lumaki kayo na sabay, nag-aral kayo, naging magkaklase, talagang magkaibigan kayo. Pero in most cases, these politicians won't agree to become the ninong or ninang of you in your wedding or para sa anak mo just because gusto ka niya, di ba? Deep inside may gusto siya sa'yo eh. Meron siyang gustong makuha sa'yo, which is your loyalty, which might not come now, but sooner or later mararamdaman mo, ba't para yatang nadadala na ako dito sa politika na to? Tapos especially in the Philippines, matindi sa atin yung hiya, di ba? Yung debt of gratitude. Makakuha ka ng isang pabor, makakuha ka ng... Tsaka yung, di ba, marami sa atin yung kinikili pag nadidikit sa mga malalaking tao. Yung sadly maraming mga journalists yung parang langaw, di ba? Na pumapatong sa kalabaw. Nakita natin yan during elections eh. So yan, nakikita natin kung paano nako-compromise yung trabaho. And, for example, ito na lang, I'll be blunt, di ba? Sa ABS before covering elections, we are asked usually to sign a form declaring our possible conflicts of interest with a politician who might be running in the next election. So, pinifill out namin yun religiously. Pero in reality, sa tingin nyo, lahat ng journalists in that news network are actually observing that? Kasi matibay yung yung attachment nila in certain politicians eh. And ito, generally, not all news organizations are very concerned about that. Kasi minsan, alam nila, meron ng strings attached, pinapabayaan pa mag-cover.
Pinapabayaan na lang. Oo. As long as you get the story done, ano? Pero Christian, di ba, binanggit mo kanina yung, binanggit natin yung bakit hindi pwede or bawal. Pero sa ibang journalists, okay lang yun. Wala nang problema yun. I'm a journalist, kino-cover ko pa, ginagawa ko pa yung trabaho. Pero as you said, we all agree na hindi alam ng publiko yun kung anong bawal at unethical tsaka hindi. Sa experience mo, what is the most pronounced unethical practices during covering elections?
May mga journalists I know and heard of na they're really making big money during election campaigns. They're looking forward to this. I heard this first in 2010. I know, kilala ko yung journalist ngayon. And medyo may reputation siya within the industry. Ang maganda kasi sa journalism, it's small enough for us to know what each other is doing, including the shenanigans. So may mga nakakabili ng kotse, second hand. Imagine magkano second hand car back then, di ba? During 2 election cycles. Para makapag-raise ka ng perang gano'n. Ito lang, para lang maintindihan nyo ng mga nanonood sa atin. When I was covering the House of Representatives, alam ko nangyayari yun nun. Kasi I was also offered. Yung may nagparamdam sa akin ay isang politiko, sabi sa akin, isang congressman, Christian, we were talking about a story. I was interviewing him. Tapos eventually, dinala niya yung conversation dun sa sabi niya, pag may kailangan ka, sabihin mo lang sa akin. Tapos nagets ko na yung cue eh. Gusto niya akong bigyan ng monthly retainer. Okay? Monthly retainer. Kasi mas maganda at mas prominent yung news organization mo, mas mataas yung value mo sa kanila.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So imagine naman, let's say, ikaw reporter, may sweldo ka ng, example, 30,000 a month. Tapos nag-alaga ka na, by the way, tinanggihan ko yan. I can look at that politician straight in the eye. Pero example, ikaw, journalist ka, sumisweldo ka ng 30,000 a month. Nag-alaga ka ng 5 congressman. Sabihin natin tumatanggap ka lang ng 10,000 a month. Just by not writing anything negative about him. Mm-hmm. Or 20,000 each by writing praise releases about that politician. Mm-hmm. I-multiply mo yun by 5. E di tiba-tiba yung
right.
Yung journalist, diba?
Mm-hmm.
Imagine mo, dalhin mo yung kalakaran na yun sa election kung saan mas kailangan ka ng politiko. Mas tataas yung value mo sa kanila. At ang transaction doon, hindi lang yung huwag kang sumulat ng hindi maganda sa kanya. Kasama rin yung pagandahin mo yung imahe niya.
Pagandahin mo imahe. Consistent dapat.
One side of the political fence. Ginagawa ng lahat yan. Administration, opposition, and other political parties. Naging kalakaran yan.
Oo. Christian, housekeeping. Talking about housekeeping. Quick. Okay lang ba for any journalist to expose a journalist or some journalist for wrongdoings? Pag alam mo unethical, tama ba yun? Mamaya si Tristy tatanungin ko nito dun sa Code of Ethics kasi very interesting sa tanong na yun. At tanong ito noon pa, na okay lang ba na-expose mo? O ikaw, kung sa tingin ng iba, holier than thou ka, di ba? Sa tingin mo, okay lang yun?
Sa akin okay lang, pero we really have to be more transparent about what we do. Kasi alam ko, tradition na rin nakalagay yan, di ba? Thou shall not take unfair advantage of fellow journalists.
Oo.
Tapos kasama yung conversation na tahimik lang tayo rito. Ang problema, bakit ang ingay natin about corruption outside of our industry? Pero pag sa atin, parang nagkakaroon tayo ng dual personality. Nagkakaroon ng dichotomy, di ba? It's okay to be a watchdog of others in society, but within ourselves, tahimik ka lang. May tinatawag niyang old boys club, di ba?
Yeah, may
Pero
problema
syempre, napapansin ko lang naman, ito lang yung conversation. Huwag naman tayo masyadong self-righteous.
Yeah.
For example, may isang tabloid reporter, isang cameraman, nakita mo tumanggap ng envelope, 200 piso, 500 piso. Expose mo bigla na tipong, napaka-corrupt na tao nito. Sunugin yan. Minsan may ganun, di ba? Parang napaka-self-righteous. Hindi mo nakikita na.
Okay.
There are other ways to address that particular situation.
Correct. In that sense, merong addressing the elephant in the room, but there's also a problem with accountability sa atin mismo within our ranks, diba, in terms of housekeeping, etc. But here's a question from Rosemary Roque for panelists. I was a media liaison officer before a party list. Minsan, paglabas ko sa office, papuntang elevator, nakasabay ko ilang mga reporter na kachikahan na rin, ika nga. Very relaxed sila, nagsabi na galing kami kay boss na naghahanda na kasi para sa election or sa elections. Nag-joke sila, baka seryoso, lol, or something like that. Nasasakyan nila ang gulay na associated sa pangalan ni boss nila. Gulay or kulay?
Gulay yan, parang kilala pa yung politician na yan.
Gulay, hint, di ba sino pa Congress rep dati na katunog ng isang gulay? Sharing lang pala to, Share lang ni Rose. Ito mga ganitong, these are realities on the ground, Christian, whether bago mag-election, during election, after elections, kahit na walang election, di ba? Kasi, yun ang ginagawa ng...
Idagdag ko lang. Total, prangkahan na usapan to, di ba?
Yeah.
Kaya tinatagalog ko talaga para mas, mas dumiin sa mga nanood sa atin, di ba? Yung corruption across platforms yan. So, example, yung kanina example sa binibigay ko, print. Nangyayari yan sa print, di ba? Because that was my experience when I was a print reporter. Ngayon, bantayan ng mga nanonood sa atin, bantayan natin lahat, yung mga talk shows, mga programs, especially leading up to the elections. Tinay niyo minsan pag may mga kandidato o nagpaparamdam na bakit pa ulit-ulit na ini-interview to, wala namang katuturan. Bakit yung paraan ng pagtatanong ng news anchor, for instance, parang slanted o parang masyado accommodating? Doon tayo mag-isip. Okay? Because during, for example, ng 2019 elections, may ilang nagparamdam din sa akin, diba? For example, para bang gusto magpa-guess. Yeah. Imagine mo, kunwari program 1 hour or 30 minutes. Bibigyan mo siya ng ganong kahabang oras to talk about himself. O sige, bigyan natin ng opportunity. Pero make sure bembangin mo for the inadequacies, for the things, for the track record, for the things that you fail to do. Pero minsan, pag minsan yung opportunity na binigay mo, parang binigyan mo siya ng red carpet, parang nilatag mo yung lahat sa kanya. O sige, first question, tapos sa'yo na lahat. Take it away. I mean, mag-isip-isip yung mga tao, baka bayad yun. Or baka merong very strong strings attached involved between those, the anchors or the reporters and the politicians. Kasi sinasabi ko dati sa staff namin, make sure news value ang magdidikta kung sino yung iimbitahan natin na guest at kung sino at kung ano yung mga topic na pag-uusapan natin. Number 1 rule, pa nag-volunteer, automatic tanggihan. Unless overwhelming yung news value ng tao na yun. Ito pa isa,
atat mag-interview.
Share ko na rin, Ariel. Pasensya na kayo, napapahaba kasi medyo
mamaya
ako rito sa usapan natin. Isa na lang. Tapos shut up na.
Okay, go.
Mag-ingat din tayo rin sa mga political analysts, quote-unquote. Kasi may iba dyan bayad ng mga politicians. Okay? I've discovered that for a fact. May isang umamin sa akin. Okay? So, hindi ko na siya in-interview ever since.
Okay. So, ibig sabihin nun, yung political analyst, mas maganda yung analysis niya sa isang kandidato. Ganon, ano?
Kasi garapal pa. Yung talking points binibigay dun sa political analyst.
Oo.
Binibigay yung talking points sa kanya. Yun lang. Yun lang yung mapag-uusapan niya. Siyempre, magaling na yung political analyst, diba? Kasi may pinag-aralan, nakakapag-English. Imagine nyo, if they want to control the reporters, why won't they try to control the political analysts who are being controlled by the reporters? Who are being interviewed by the reporters.
Yeah, true. Mamaya ulit, Christian, ano? Okay, here's a question from Romel Lopez, I think not for all panelists, but I think directed at PPI and KBP, si Ami siguro, or anyone if you can answer this, but I can only speak for PPI. But he asks, was there ever a journalist or media organization that was penalized by the PPI or KBP for violation of the Code of Ethics? Ami, meron ka bang maalala?
We I don't remember, but we had a parang a mechanism to do that, diba? If the right yung parang the right of reply yata yung
Right of
idea.
reply, yeah.
Yeah, that so if parang if somebody wants to complain against a media organization,
Correct. A
they
reporter
tell,
or news article.
reporter, yeah. So they report. First, they go to the editor, and if the editor doesn't do anything about it, it's parang ipadala sa PPI for the PPI to do so. I think we already had something like that, Ariel, right?
We had, yeah.
To call their attention on this.
Pero Ami, saguin natin ng konti. Institutionally, PPI does that through the Philippine Press Council. Hindi naman madami, pero yung accountability andun. Pero speaking of accountability kasi, how do you do that in the newsroom? Kasi itong pinag-usapan na yung Code of Ethics is there. Tapos, andyan lang naman, pwede mong sundin or hindi. Call mo yan eh. Ikaw as an editor sa newsroom, paano mo pinipinalize? Anong sanctions?
They usually, parang humane. When somebody calls, in community media, they just call you. They can get your number. They just call you and then they complain. So we try to solve it. I mean, if it's just something that we can do, like we give a erratum if it's our fault, or sometimes when they claim that they're misquoted. We try to give the recorder or the notes of our reporter. But sometimes, if you have offended an official who is very popular, immediately we get libeled. So we are facing libel cases. So I think that's their what's this to call our attention if they think that it's better to put that to file a case. Against the newspaper.
In the court na pero
court,
expensive yun. Pero that's why there's go ahead please. I have this case, but it was resolved after 10 years, and it wasn't even about us. It was something like an advertisement that he claimed that we photoshopped, but it's not true, and we have the evidence. We have the picture as evidence, and yet because he's very influential in the community, it was still filed, and we had to do that for the past 10 years. You know how difficult it is for a community newspaper, and it was filed in Manila, so we had to go, me and Secretary Duresa, we had to fly to Manila every time. I remember, expensive nga, di ba? So, okay na ba? Meaning okay? Tapos na? Hindi pa rin?
Tapos na.
Tapos na rin. Okay.
And then,
hopefully, no more libel. And then, that's the reason talaga. And talking about, ladies and gentlemen, talking about the Philippine Press Council right of reply, specifically now included in the revised or expanded Code of Ethics. So talk about it. Therese, ang ganda na understatement, pero it's a good thing na sinama natin the importance of right of reply na binabanggit ni Ami ngayon as the last provision in the Code of Ethics in covering elections. Bakit mahalaga ito, Therese? Yung right of reply.
Maganda rin kasi na nakikita nung audience, nung readers, ng balita na yung journalists talagang kailangan makinig sa feedback, no? So there's a section on listening to feedback and upholding the right of reply. Binabanggit din doon, apart from the role of KBP, the role of the press councils, yung mga organizations that monitor the media and conduct a journalism review, sila yung nag-identify ng recommended practices, nagpo-point out ng errors, weaknesses, areas for improvement, and in-emphasize talaga na kapag nagkaroon ng mistake, of course the media, of course journalists are not perfect, but kailangan pa rin kailangan mag-verify, pero kapag nagkamali, they need to issue an erratum immediately, right? So may emphasis on that. And dagdagan ko lang, no, earlier you were speaking with Christian about yung whether or not journalists should call out fellow journalists.
Correct.
Connected siya dito eh. It's really important for journalists and media workers to listen to each other and call out if needed. Pero siguro may tamang proseso, may tamang paraan. It's not about bashing
or humiliating
them. Dapat galing siya sa, kumbaga, concern, out of concern. And there are even conferences, right, among media workers and dialogues sa PPI kung saan pinag-uusapan yung mga issues na ito, including media corruption. So, ayun, kailangan lang piliin kung saan pag-uusapan yung mga issues.
Proper venue. First, uunahan ko na yung audience or unahan kita, no? Kasi when they get to read this, it's going to be uploaded in the paper website. You have the original version, the updated version, they can compare. Pero after all these discussions about unethical practice and calling out, etc., and what not to do under certain circumstances, and that how important to really keep your credibility intact, not only in journalists but also media organizations. Paano pag nagkamali? Paano may violations? But anyway, now we're in the code, pinag-usapan natin yung sanctions or penalties. How do we do that? Pabayaan na natin yung mga newsrooms to have the kind of mechanism to reprimand the journalists or the reporters.
Merong discussion about how the Philippine Press Council under PPI works, how the Cebu Citizens Press Council works, and how the KBP Standards Authority works. No? So now that it's part of the revised code, malalaman na rin ng public kung paano sila makakapag-report on these unethical issues or mga maling information being reported in the media.
Okay. Ito, sige, mamaya uli. Okay, ito, meron tayong humor. Well, ito from Aris Gutierrez, just to break the seriousness of the discussion conversation. Sabi ni Aris Gutierrez, syempre si Aris Gutierrez, seasoned editor na to, pero tumuwid na sa ibang trabaho. Pero once a journalist, always a journalist. Sabi ni Aris, when you see a salaried editor riding a jeep to work and a correspondent who gets paid 50 to 100 per story driving a Montero, something's wrong. Tama, Christian, di ba? Along that line, yung mga specifics of an ethical practice, telltale signs na meron talaga problema. Di ba? Yeah, sure. Please.
May gusto akong idagdag niya. Maganda kasi mga sinasabi niya ni Sir Aris dito eh.
Yeah.
Nakaka-relate ako rito.
Go.
Some of these things talaga nakita ko with the other reporters. Minsan ako dati in-advocate ko. Bago pa lang ako rin sa ABS-CBN. So I was asked to attend an orientation where the ethics manual was discussed. So nung tinanong, who among you read the ethics manual? Nagtaas ako ng kamay. Tapos nag-joke sa akin. Sabi, ba't ko binasa? Sabi, hindi ba dapat? Tapos nung nag-uusapan na yung corruption, ganyan. Yung binabanggit ni Therese kanina, diba? There's a proper venue for that. Ang nagiging problema ko lang sa gano'n, the proper venue usually doesn't lead anywhere.
Does that happen?
Nagkakaroon ng may venue, may usapan, pero walang pinatutunguhan. Nagkakaroon ng ventilation of issues. Okay? So napansin ko nung for instance yung, sabi ko, siguro magandang gawin dito. Sinadjust ko na yan dati before I left sa Inquirer, tsaka sa ABS din. Sabi ko, why don't we do, tawag dito yung lifestyle check of reporters.
Oh,
okay. So just to give us an idea, whether there's unexplained wealth or unexplained poverty among our ranks. Okay? Kasi that would give the office an idea of the kind of job this person is doing. Especially, during elections. Kasi, just to cite an example, I know of one person, talagang ang hilig sa wining and dining. Pag nagba-birthday, big politicians yung ma-attend, nagbabayad. Yung mga na-cover niya iba't ibang mga politiko, nagpapadala ng kanya-kanya mga media staff or liaison, tapos pagdating dun sa club or high-end restaurant, kanya-kanyang bayad yung mga yon. They pitch in para doon sa party ng reporter. Dati na siyang ganun eh. Bata pa siya eh. Alam ko na eh. So, hindi humihinto yung ganung practice hanggang tumanda siya eh. So, that's just one person.
Okay lang yun. I was
Hindi siya
about to
okay.
ask you. I mean, I
Hindi
was
siya
about to
okay.
ask you kasi lifestyle niya yun bago pa siya naging journalist, whining and
No.
dining.
Ginawa niya yun nung reporter na siya.
Nung reporter na siya.
Dikit na siya sa malalaking tao, sa mayayaman
Totally
tao.
na okay. Kasi
At
as
yung
you
totoo dito,
mentioned,
binabasa ko yung comment ni Ares, diba, doon sa nagbigay ng bilao sa editors. Ayan, isang sakit yan sa mga newsrooms eh. Pag ang journalist, special editors, may birthday, yung iba sinasabi talaga directly sa mga PR people para magpadala ng lechon.
My God.
Ako, I make it as a rule, I don't declare my birthday in social media. Kasi sigurado may magpaparamdam, di ba? Just to avoid situations of corruption, wag mo na sabihin, di ba? So, kaso, dyan nahilig yung mga tao. Parang, ang justification nila dyan, hindi ka naman hiningi, binigay eh. That's a cop-out.
laging ganun.
That's a cop-out. Di ba? Kasi alam mo naman na merong hihingin sa iyo eventually. Alam mo naman na meron siyang gusto makuha from you. Kunwari, kada birthday mo, birthday ng anak mo, binyag, nagpapadala ng pagkain. O kaya kada interview nyo, nagdi-dinner kayo sa hotel lobby. Yung sa mga hotel restaurants. Yung talagang malilibing ka na sa utang na loob eh. Pagdating ba ng araw na makiusap sa iyo, uy, baka naman pwede mo muna akong isama niya sa story na yan, ganyan. Obviously, di ba, laling kultura natin, debt of gratitude. Medyo madaling bumigay, di ba?
Pinoy na Pinoy.
Bibigyan ka this one time.
Oo. Pero di ba, Christian, di ba, meron ding prinsipyo about talking about all this, kung anong bawal, anong hindi mo hiningi, pero binigay sa'yo. Binigyan ka ng ball pen, na murang-mura, Ami, as against, bibigyan ka ng ball pen na napaka-expensive.
It's still the
Ano
same.
tatanong yun? Binigyan ka na ng ball pen na murang-mura. Kasi I know business world has the strictest guidelines on ethical guidelines, di ba? Okay lang ba tinanggap mo? Or pag tinanggap mo itong mahal na ballpen, dapat ibalik mo or ano yun, exchange bigyan mo rin siya. Or pag pinag-coffee ka, ipag-coffee mo rin, di ba? Paano yun?
Ako, ginagawa ko, Ariel, as a rule, pag ako yung mag-i-interview, kasi diba interview, hindi malagi yung press ko niyan, diba? Invite mo siya sa labas, magkape kayo. And make it a point ako nagbabayad.
Yes.
So, example, invite ko sa... Pero syempre, hindi ko siya pwede invite sa hotel restaurant lagi. Ako mamamulubi. Sipin mo, yung sweldo ko ng araw na yun, mapupunta sa pakain ko sa kanya. Swerte naman niya, di ba? I remember kasi nangyari sa akin yung once eh. Medyo nagpakabibo ako masyado. I was interviewing this former diplomat. Nagpapakwento ako about what's happening dito kay Duterte, yung foreign policy niya. Kinaya ako siya sa isang Japanese restaurant. Sabi ko, tara sir, dyan tayo para malapit sa inyo. Akala ko mura eh. Ako naman, pikit lang eh. Order lang kayo.
Pabibo.
Umabot kami ng 4,000 eh. Kaya ako naman napalunok. Sabi ko,
You got your story naman.
Hindi ganun kalaki. Pero at least background. Okay. Background.
Pero that didn't happen again. Oh.
Starbucks, pwede tayo.
O di ba, yung ganung instances ka no, na parang, you're drawing the line between what's okay and what's not so okay, pero hindi ka naman talagang magiging makasalangan in that sense, ano. Pero let's go. Yeah, please.
Isa lang. Ang hirap ng discussion eh. Kasi I remember I was still with the Inquirer. We had this very animated discussion among reporters and editors on what was deemed acceptable as far as the value or amount of gifts. Kasi ang question ko dati ron, bakit yung mga newsrooms pag may Christmas party nagsusolicit ng mga regalo sa mga politiko? Inis na inis ako ron kasi before I was asked to go up dun sa office ni Joe De Venecia. He was still the speaker ng time na yan. I was doing my story sa house. Sabi sa akin, nakatanggap ako ng tawag, uy, punta ka ba sa party? Sabi ko, hindi. Hindi ako masyadong pupunta sa parties. Pagka-introvert ako siguro. Tsaka iniiwasan ko yung mga raffle na ganyan. So, Christmas party namin sa office. Sabi, okay ka naman kay Joe De Venecia. Tapos, kasi magdodonate, magbibigay siya. Nag-solicit kami dyan. Tapos, ikaw na magdala. Sabi ko, gagawin akong delivery boy nito Hindi ka kakatin sa Christmas party. So, I was able to extricate myself out of that. Pero niraise ko yun during our meeting. Sabi ko, subsequently. Sabi ko, hindi ba questionable yung ginagawa natin na nagsusolicit kayo ng mga paraffle dyan? Di ba, we have to live within our means, di ba? Yung mga owners, kung gusto na magbigay ng regalo for the staff, di fine. Pero dati, yung animated discussion na meron kami dati, napag-usapan yung value of gift. So, to be acceptable. For example, meron certain amount. Diba? Kunwari, pag pumalo ng 4,000 yung regalo, tanggihan automatic.
More than you can afford, di ba? Sabi nga, di ba? Kung di mo nang ma-afford, that's unethical na. Pero afford mo naman yung maliit na bagay.
Kaso ang problema ron, Ariel, ibig sabihin, pag tumataas yung sweldo mo, mas tumataas yung value ng regalo pwede mo tanggapin.
Correct, exactly.
Diba?
Oo, correct. Taka lang sige. Mamaya, just ko, parang kulang tong umagang ito. Pero bago kay Dr. Mora, ito kay Ami muna. Binanggit ni Christian kanina, it's not okay to receive any mag-solicit sa politics. But paano yun if corporations or private companies do give and donate? Christmas parties or ano ba yung meron special, okay, anniversary ng isang news outfit, etc. Okay ba yun, Ami, sa tingin mo? Tatanggihan mo ba yun?
That's a very, very difficult
advertiser
question.
Nyo yun. Kunyari, advertiser nyo yun.
And then you're in a community newspaper, they know you, they've known you for a long time, and they just want to give, no? For instance, Davao Light, I mean, the Voice is Power, for instance, they do that to all, what's this? Kung ako naman, if I say, thank you kasi I am so blessed. I am so blessed with an organization that can really afford. And that's why we do have Christmas parties na kami yung nag-suspend. I mean, kasi ma-pride si Willie Torres. So, yan. But sometimes when they call, they don't call sa akin. Doon sila sa accounts executive. So, I would just be surprised na, yun nga, may binigay daw ang Davao Light. But I wasn't informed dun sa account executive namin. So, medyo tricky. And but we're Filipinos, it's Christmas. All these things coming into play. Tapos, but I'm not very comfortable. Although, kasi maliit lang Davao, may talaga ako, parang reputation. They've known me since nag-start ako and they know how splada I am. So, they don't even attempt to
gift you with anything.
Whatever. Even my birthdays, I really hate that. I keep quiet. Wala talaga. Tapos, I think ethics is really very personal. It's how part of it is how you were raised and your definition of what is right and wrong. And that sticks with you until you grow. No? So you grow up. So that's why I have always received, I had a very horrible first few years with Mindanao Times because a lot of people call, they call our president, they complain about me, they want me out of Mindanao Times, they want to get rid of me because of that kind of thing na self-righteous, parang I'm not from here, so I'm not from Davao, so I should return to my province.
Kaya nga, di ba, Ami, kasi iba yung the way the public sees us as media practitioners, dapat magbago na yan na kunyari, yung mga politiko, alam mo, okay lang yan kay Christian, kay Ami, kay Therese, or kay Hemadi na tumanggap at certain circumstances. Pero journalist pa rin sila. Pero hindi okay, di ba? Parang ganun. Okay, which brings me to my question for Dr. Mora. Dr. Mora, mahaba ang tatahakin natin in terms of voter education. As I said, matagal natin for the longest time, we have been talking about, educating the public. Kayo, nasa academe kayo. You're also a journalist yourself. Paano na tong talking about democracy still in terms of exercising your right to suffrage and then voting wisely? How do we proceed from here? Kasi you have a study and that sinabi doon na, if I'm not mistaken, nasa middle na merong matatag siya na medyo hindi and that they wanted to vote. Pero ang tanong, di ba, Christian, Ami, and the rest of the panelists, nag-register na ba, Dr. Mora, di ba? Parang ganon.
Yeah.
Sige, please.
Para makakonek ako, no? Kasi maganda yung topic din ni Christian eh. Because my topic is democracy resilience. Dun lang din yung take off ko na while we are advocating and pushing for democracy resilience, ang mga media naman should also be ethical. And we should know how to practice social responsibility. Kasi we as media men are expected to be guardians of democracy. Wow, parang pelikula yan.
Guardians of the Galaxy.
guardians of democracy. Now, our credibility in claiming this title and role would now depend on our ability to engage in ethical practice. So, i-share ko lang din, Ariel, na kami sa PUP, ang training namin sa mga estudyante namin napakataas because we ascribe high value to the promotion of integrity and ethics among our students. Kaya kami naman din ay nakikiusap kapag nag-i-internship ang aming mga estudyante. Yes, because they're being interned in different companies. Nalalaman ko ang conduct ng mga media men sa pamamagitan ng mga interns namin. So sa loob ng classroom, tinuturuan namin sila ng ethics. Pero kapag nakakakita sila ng hindi magandang example sa mga media men na kung saan sila ay intern, sinasabi din nila sa amin. So it's high time, no? If we really intend to push for democracy resilience as media men, we have to, hindi pwedeng, puro sigaw lang ng democracy resilience. Kailangan, meron tayong integrity sa pagsigaw niyan.
Correct.
Diba? So that would include policing our ranks and making sure that we adhere to the highest standards of ethics. Kaya pinag-uusapan din natin ngayon. Now, when it comes to the voting public, Ariel, ang public ay aware sa mga ganito. Isa ito sa mga nagiging reason kaya nababawasan din ang trust ng public sa media. Okay, so if you want to get the public trust, dapat among our ranks, ipakita natin that we are deserving of that trust. Diba? So that is why we are discussing journalism ethics din. Dahil may kinalaman din ito sa democracy resilience na inilalaban natin.
Dr. Ma, on the other hand, we're also talking about media and information literacy here. And information lit, MIL, a lot of efforts have been put in. Nasa curriculum na siya. Curious ako kung, well, I never asked this sa mga, sa mga teachers, sa mga mothers na nagpapaaral ng kanilang mga anak. Pero kasama mo yung voter education. Pero syempre, tanong ko lang yun kasi mga bata pa naman ito. I mean, they cannot vote pa. Ito yung mga elementary or high school, etc. Pero yung tamang pag-appreciate ng good governance, hindi ko alam kung paano. Parte ba yun ng MIL? Hindi lang media environment,
According to the findings, yung yield nung research, data revealed that media literacy affects the type and level of political participation of the public. So, ang isang tao daw, kapag siya ay media literate, yung kanyang level at type ng political participation ay mataas din. Pero kapag mababa ang media literacy niya, you can expect na yung participation niya ay somewhat erroneous din. So parang tapos at hindi tama ang pagkakaunawa niya sa mga issues.
Dr. Mora, okay, theoretically kunyari, pag tumaas ang voter registration and then ang boto next year, tumaas din ba? Is that tatamo to saying tumaas ang literacy? Oo.
Not necessarily. Pwedeng mataas ang registration dahil maraming bumibili ng boto ng mga tao. Nangyayari yun. Diba? Kaya mas mataas ang registration kasi maraming nagpapamudmod.
Pag tumaas ang boto nga, pag tumaas yung boto, does not follow also?
It's not an indicator. It's about intelligent voting. It's how they exercise that political right. Diba? And it's about their preferences. Their political preferences, their ability to exercise intelligent preferences in voting. Nandoon nakasalala yan eh. So, yung lack of media literacy adds to the confusion of the public. With rampant false information, the public now finds it difficult to determine kung ano talaga yung paniniwalaan niya kasi hindi naman siya marunong mag-discern. So it now becomes a problem to the voting public. So tayo ngayon talaga kailangan turuan natin sila. This is now our obligation to teach them. Now, tama naman at a young age, senior high school pa lang meron ng MIL. We are thankful na may ganyan. Yes, lahat, all tracks ay meron ng MIL. Pero Raliel, ngayon lang yan. Paano na yung mga, yung mga may edad na kailangan pa rin ng media literacy. Kasi hindi lang kabataan ang nangangailangan yan. In fact, marami sa mga policy makers natin kailangan din ng media literacy.
Correct. Dr. Mora, we've all been saying that journalists and educators are allies, in nation building, in whatever, appreciation of realities, etc., in honing and molding, the next blah and all next generation of journalists, communicators, educators, etc.
Yeah, that's true.
Pero how do you, ngayong we're in the middle of a raging pandemic and that things will be different, talking about the elections, paano yung magiging engagement ng journalism at ng academe for a more democratic, resilient, illiterate society? In that sense, kasi you are in the better position as academics and academic institution for that matter, in the better position to really educate the public, put in all the efforts in terms of, having to impress on them the need to register, the need to vote, and eventually the need to elect the right leaders of this country.
Mm-hmm. So ngayon, Ariel, ito tayo, no? We are engaging in online public forum. Ito na ngayon ang avenue natin. Kasi, well, whether we like it or not, we have to adhere by the rules and guidelines. Sa amin, on the part of the academe, hanggat hindi sinasabi ng CHED na pwede nang mag face-to-face,
Right.
we cannot. So, hanggat walang go signal para mag face-to-face, all our students, the academe itself, has to utilize online resources. Ito, nasa online tayo lahat. Ang mga estudyante nasa online. In fact, most of them are right now watching and listening to this forum. So itong engagement ng mga media people and the academe mostly are happening in the online media. Yan. At yan ang limitation natin ngayon. So, wala tayong Facebook pa. Yes.
Limitations for a lot of things, mobility, access, etc. And we've all been talking about how we wish things were back to normal, pero iba na magiging normal. We're left with 10 minutes more to go to end this particular activity, and we're so happy that you're joining us today. Wish it could have been longer, kaso yun lang talaga, that's all the time we have today. But one last question for everyone, very general, looking forward to the next elections in 2022. How do we see journalists covering elections in this time of the pandemic? Who wants to start? And any inspiring words, probably, how difficult, amidst the difficulty in all these restrictions in covering elections under this pandemic, paano natin i-encourage yung journalists natin, communicators, content providers to keep up the good work? Yeah, in that sense. Christian na siguro. The gentleman first and then the ladies na.
Okay. Thank you. Again, thank you for inviting me to this forum. Siguro, we have to accept the fact that the upcoming election campaign for 2022 would be perhaps much more difficult because of the restrictions. More candidates will be spending more, they're going to spend bigger money for their social media campaign. Mas magiging pronounced yung network na tinatawag. And with that, we have to be more, most of us would be more susceptible to possible spread of misinformation and disinformation.
Yeah.
So it's not enough na alam natin difference between disinformation and misinformation. Siguro dapat mas maintindihan natin talaga kung paano siya kumakalat.
Exactly.
And with that, I think we really need to engage the tech companies and seek more accountabilities from them. Tapos hindi mo pwedeng sabihin lang na by doing good journalism, going back to the basics, everything will be okay. It's not. Kasi yung lumalabas sa mga feeds natin, that is controlled by the tech companies, diba?
Yeah.
So, miski anong gawin mo dyan, pwedeng hindi lumabas sa feed ng mga tao. Basta pwedeng pronounce yung echo chambers sa iba't ibang mga tao. And this is where the big money coming from politicians are at work. So, siguro on the part of the voters, maganda yung sinasabi natin media at information literacy. Ako, lagi kong tinatanong sa sarili ko, ano ba ibig sabihin pag sinasabi natin sa mga tao, you have to vote smart? Kasi it's a very loaded question. Yung definition of smart vote can mean many different things. So sa mga mas naiintindihan yung takbo ng eleksyon at yung role ng media sa isang demokrasya, maliwanag yung ibig sabihin ng smart vote. Pero dun sa ordinaryong magsasaka, yung naglalabandera, for example, sa probinsya, yung smart vote dun sa mga may kaya, hindi yan ang smart vote sa kanya. For example, alam niya corrupt yung congressman, alam niya corrupt yung barangay captain or yung councilor. Pero dun siya nakaasa ng livelihood niya, di ba? So sa kanya yung smart vote niya, pag binoto niya yun. tatanggapin niya yung binibigay sa kanya. At alam niya, pag hindi nanalo yun, mawawalan siya ng livelihood. This is what we call political patronage, which is very much, I wouldn't say endemic, pero kasi nangyayari sa iba't ibang mga bansa rin, di ba? Pero sa Pilipinas, iba yung style ng political patronage. And unfortunately, yung problem ng political patronage is also manifested, has also infected journalists. So tayo mismo, mayroon tayong mga patron, mayroon tayong mga apo-apo dito sa kino-cover natin.
The
So it's really
principal.
messed up. But again, I don't want this conversation to end on a negative note. Kasi, pardon me for the cynicism siguro. Hindi lang skepticism. Siguro pag tumagal ka sa industriya, lalo yung mga mas matatanda sa atin, meron talagang trajectory yan, di ba?
Yeah.
You start doubting, then you become a skeptic, and then in the end, nagiging cynical ka na eh.
Yeah.
Pero, we cannot actually give up on our idealism. Maayos pa rin kahit papano. For example, huwag lang tayong bumigay sa mga demands, sa mga pressures, sa mga campaign strategies na politiko. Alam mo, itong politikong to, walang kakwenta-kwenta, alam mo, walang mabuti maidudulot siyang pagnanalo. Siyempre, hindi mo siya dapat siraan. But you have to be more critical in terms of reporting about that person. Kunwari, walang track record, you say so. Kung meron track record, you have to focus on what he has actually done or failed to do. So, marami tayong pwedeng gawin during the elections. I'm really thankful for opportunities like this. Kaya salamat sa inyo.
Let's do some more. Thanks, Christian Esguerra, for joining us today. It's wonderful to be talking to you on these significant conversations. And let's go to Therese. Any final words? Sabi ni Christian, merong positive note, negative note, pero paano tayo? Okay.
Well, I hope journalists become more mindful, more conscious about following both ethical and safety guidelines in covering elections amid the pandemic. Because by demonstrating that they are being ethical, professional, and transparent in reporting on the elections, sana journalists will be able to earn or regain and maintain the public's trust. But I'd like to add, kailangan talaga erase yung issues na nabanggit ni Christian and our my fellow panelists and the participants. After updating the Code of Professional and Ethical Conduct in covering the elections, marami pa rin talagang related problems na kailangan ma-address to help tackle the ethical challenges journalists face. And kasama dito yung nabanggit na sustainability ng media outlets and their business models, diba? Para mabigyan ng tamang sweldo, ng tamang benefits yung media workers. And then, how do we find more journalists who have the same mindset and attitude as Christian? Yung automatic yung nato-turn off sa at naiinis sa unethical practices, automatic na nare-recognize yung ethical issues. So I think apart from media and information literacy, we really need to work on values education in schools. Doon talaga nagsisimula yun.
Thanks, Therese, for being with us, and see a lot of more discussions with you in the future. Not only ethics, not only, but other studies as well. And let's go to Ami. Probably the next discussion or in another forum, we can talk about the Bangsamoro more particularly. Because it takes a lot of time to really discuss the Bangsamoro, diba?
Yeah.
Final words, Ami.
Okay. So for this topic, I would just like to go back to democracy resilience. And when I think of that, I believe that it's not only government, but also building strong institutions like media, the women's sector, the farmers, the labor, all, because that really provides the balance for government to do what is right. And a lot of things happen, like in Davao City, like all good things, like the 911, the children's code, the women's development code did not happen because of government. It happened because we have very strong institutions. And it was, for instance, our 911, that was started by the Davao Light and Power Company. They did the infrastructure and everything. So I think it has also to, a good working democracy needs to have strong institutions. And then for the elections, I think the reality is that there are only very few newspapers now in Mindanao. I mean, and even radio stations are closing. So, but we are challenged to really to work on that, to really inform the voters. But we have also to consider that in the analysis of the post 2016 elections, it was found out that 70% or 65 to 70% of people who voted come from the class D, and only 20% vote of ABC, classes voted. So we now look at who are our audience when we try to win over to make these voters vote wisely. So there are so many things that we still have to consider, but for now, I'm so very happy to be invited on this forum, and I'm very open, like before, to continue this conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Well said. Thanks very much, Ami, for joining us today, and see you in our next activities. Let's go finally, last but not least, to Dr. Hemedy Mora. Dr. Hemedy Mora, where do we proceed from here?
What I foresee, no, Ariel, sa election na to. Now, the success of the electoral process involves, para sa akin, it involves an interplay among the key players. Sino ang mga key players dito? Of course, ang media ay key player. Andyan din ang government. Okay? Andyan ang COMELEC. Andyan ang academe. At andyan ang voting public. Para sa akin, ito ang mga key players. Now, if we do our part at tayo ay naging very cooperative at yung mga limitations natin brought about by the pandemic ay meron tayong pangtapat na solusyon dyan, then I don't see any reason why the electoral process wouldn't be successful. Ano? Kaya lang, babalik ako, Ariel, dun sa sinasabi ko kanina na saan ang guidelines. I think what we need to work on, what the concerned people, like for example, the COMELEC, should be working on right now are guidelines. And itong mga guidelines na to talaga ay workable. Workable for the media, workable for the voting public. Like, ako, Ariel, isa agad ang number one na tanong ko, as part of the voting public. Isang araw lang ba ang eleksyon? 2 araw? 3 araw? Isang linggo?
Or pwede ba mag-vote online or mag-register online, di ba?
Yes,
Ganun,
yung mga ganyan, ang daming tanong ng voting public. In the same way na ang dami ring tanong ng media. Ako, para sa akin, as early as possible, sana masagot itong mga tanong na to. Paghandaan. Actually, dun sa study, Ariel, ang recommendation doon is sana meron pang isang study para ma-determine ang readiness natin. It would not be too late for this study na magawa at kailangan talaga na how ready are we in this electoral process, the readiness of the Philippines for the electoral process. Sana merong ganyang study din para malaman natin kung anong level ba ang kahandaan natin. At pag nalaman natin na hindi tayo handa, pwede pa tayong may gawing paraan. Meron pa tayong interventions para matuloy at maging handa tayo. Pero sa pag-aaral na yan, aaralin yung key players. Okay, so sa part ng media, sa part ng COMELEC, sa part ng government, that's why para sa akin even the researches are also very essential because they tell us what we should do. So yan ang tuntungan natin para gawin yung mga dapat nating gawin. I think that would be all, Ariel. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Mar, for those wonderful thoughts on our topic particularly, and moving forward, ano pa yung pwede natin i-take on as part of voter education. Thanks to all our panelists. Thanks for joining us. That's a wrap, ladies and gentlemen. At ingat po tayong lahat. And just a quick reminder for all participants, I think the survey questionnaire has already been posted on the chat room. To get your certificates, you have to respond to the evaluation form, particularly, as I said, para po makakuha kayo na set. Thanks to Seidel Foundation, Carol, to Attorney Gas, to our training and production team. Maraming salamat to the Philippine Press Institute, to JSAP, particularly organizing this topic this morning. Sana meron pa tayong activities next time para mag-usap-usap pa tayo, because that's all we need to really do, continuous discussions, significant discourse on a lot of things that matter to, not only to our lives as communicators, journalists, pero it matters to the lives of every citizen in this country. Wherever you are, please keep safe and be well. Thanks very much. See you next time.
Thank you, Ariel.
Thank you.
Thank you.